episode of Tool Time. On this episode, we're going to be talking all about the miter saw. As you might have noticed in other videos, I have very few yellow tools in this shop. But the DeWalt makes one of the best miter saws that are in the market right now. And so that's why we got one. To help me talk about the miter saw, we have a special guest host, Mrs. Eriksen. So the miter saw is one of the handiest tools to have on a job site. Everyone from framers, trim carpenters especially. I've seen plumbers using these things to cut their pipes if they need to. But it's just very handy because it makes perfect, accurate square cuts, and also this one will do miter cuts. And so that's why it's called a miter saw. And so you hear that word miter is just referring to cutting an angle. And so you can see you can slide the saw from side to side. So this saw goes from 50 degrees to 60, or you lock it right here at 0, lock it in place, and it'll be a perfect 90-degree cut or 0-degree cut. You can think of it either way. And so the saw, when you come into the classroom, it should be in this torn down position, basically where it's set up, safe, no one's going to hurt themselves. So to make the saw ready for use, first you have to put it at 0 or 90 degree. All right, now you want to raise the head of the saw. So you have to push down on the front. That's very important. Make sure you push down on the front. And then right here on the back, there's a little button / lever. You just have to pull that knob out, and now your saw is free to go up and down. And then your last step is you want to free the sliding motion, where there's a little dial here on the back. Turn that knob left, and now you're free to slide. Your saw is ready to cut. The last step is to go ahead and turn on your shadow line, which is this little button right here on the top. Hit that switch, and it turns on your shadow line. And so your miter saw is ready to go. And it's always plugged in, so the power is always live. So if you squeeze the trigger, it's going to run. So make sure you don't mess around when you walk by in class. Don't just do it for fun, because it could cut your fingers, right? So make sure you're ready to go. You only squeeze it when you want to. Think of it like a gun. You only put your finger on the trigger if you want to shoot. Same thing with saws or any tool. Only squeeze the trigger if you actually want to use it. And when you're using it, make sure the area around you is clear as well. You don't want other students close with their fingers either. So make sure you have plenty of space to work and that no one else is in the danger zone. So the first thing we're going to demonstrate is just how to make a simple square cut. And so we have our saw set at the 0-degree mark. Everything's ready to go. We have it so it can slide freely, move up and down. And so when you make your cuts, to be safe, the important thing you want to do is always make sure with your offhand you're holding the board down securely. You want to push it at an angle, think to the corner of the fence. You want to be pushing that direction. You don't want to push straight down or straight back, but kind of at an angle because you want it to stay locked in. If you don't hold it, the board has a tendency to want to pop up because the blade is spinning and it wants to pull the board up in the air. So make sure you're applying down pressure. Before we cut, thank you for the reminder, we got to wear our safety glasses. All right, so I'll do it for cut and then I'll let you do it. So again, you're pushing straight down and keep your fingers away at least 6 inches. I like to think of it as circle here. If I keep my fingers out of this circle, I know I'm safe. So keep it back here. And when you make your cut, you don't want to just go straight down full speed, right? You want to come out to the angle here on the corner and then plunge there and then slide it backwards. You always want to get the blade up to full speed before you encounter the wood. You don't want to hold it into the wood and then try to start it. Let the blade get spinning full speed, plunge cut, and then slide it back. Wait for it to stop spinning. Now you're good to go. You go ahead and try it.
All right, here we go. I'm going to move it over some.
Yeah, whatever I like.
Okay. I have my fingers here. Did I get it all the way through?
You got it all the way through. Perfect. And so when you start your cut, if you have it down here a little bit when you squeeze the trigger, it's going to want to pop up a little bit, just the motor motion, the momentum, so just be ready for that. It might want to jump a little bit on you.
Okay.
So just don't freak out if it bounces a little.
Okay.
All right. So just make sure you have good grip on both the board and the saw. So the cool thing with the miter saw, if you're right or left-handed, you can use either hand to control the trigger, but it's important that you don't cross your arms. So first demonstrate a safe cutting position for us. right? So the board is to the right of the blade, and so she's holding it with her right hand. So what would be unsafe? Yeah, so go ahead and just pull the head of the saw down just so you can see. See how close that is to your arm? It's very dangerous, so you don't want to cross your arms. So if the board is to the right of the blade, use your right hand to support the board and your left hand on the saw. If it's the other side, vice versa.
All right.
So to make a miter cut, there is a locking lever here. So you click this up, and now it's not quite ready to unlock. There's also a button. It's a two-step process. So you gotta push this up and push this button in, and you can slide it back and forth to different angles. So you could here engage, there's some notches on the wheel, so angles that are commonly used, so 45, your 22.5, and your 31.5. Those would be for crown molding and different things. But common angles, there's these dents, so when you swing it around, you're going to feel it click in automatically, and then you can lock it in place. So you want to override those detents, or those notches. You can, if you push that button down, and then you flip this little lever up, it locks the button in a down position, which makes it free to swing. And so if you have to cut a custom angle, that is how you would do it. So for ease, let's just do a 45-degree angle. So I'll slide it over, lock it in place, and show you again. It's safer, sometimes you can't, it doesn't work out because your piece you're cutting, but if you're able to, you want your drop off to be on the outside.
Right.
And so that is because the blade, you don't want it to push it up against here. It could bind. If you do it here, that piece will fall away, and you don't have to worry about anything binding. So if you're able to, your off cut, have it be to the outside of the blade.
Okay.
So again, everything's the same. Keep your hand back, down pressure. Straight through. So I'm going to set it to 0.
Okay.
And then you go ahead and move it.
All right. So 2-step. Up. Up. All right. Lock.
And then make sure you push the lever down so it's fully locked in place.
Okay. Sound good?
Yep.
All right. So this is all the way over. Hands out of the way. So, again.
Which is fine, wood has that. And so part of the binding up was you're just going into that knot. So
Okay.
everything is good.
Okay.
All right.
I'm glad I could show you guys what happened with a knot.
Yep. And so there are imperfections in wood. You always have to be ready for that. A knot is just where another branch was coming out of the tree. And so that's just harder wood to cut because the grain pattern is different. So sometimes it happens. And that's why you want to make sure you have a good grip on everything. Because when you felt it binding up,
I
it
did,
didn't kick.
yeah.
You just had to put some more pressure onto it.
Okay.
So the last thing that I'll show you guys how to do is do a bevel cut by tilting the saw. This is a compound saw, meaning you could angle it this way and angle it on a bevel.
Okay.
So we'll leave it at 0. So if you're going to do a bevel cut, first thing you need to do is slide your fence out of the way. So there's a knob here on the back.
Okay.
You loosen that, and then this is free to slide in. And I'll show you why. If I did slide that out of the way, and you move this over, what's going to happen if you push that blade down?
Yeah, that's
It's going to hit your fence, right?
Yep.
So you just slide this out of the way, and then when you make your cut, it'll be clear. To adjust the bevel of the saw, there's this wheel on the back. You crank that loose, and now it makes it so the saw is free to lean. And then when you're at the angle you want, you just have to reach back and tighten it back in place. And so that'll hold your saw at the bevel. And now you're again good to go. These cuts are a little bit awkward, but it's just gotta be comfortable. So keep your hands out of the way again and slide down. And think when you're pushing, you want it to be in the motion with the saw.
Yeah.
How you're pushing. You don't want to try to push it straight down because the blade's trying to go at an angle. So push it with the angle. Just like that.
Okay.
Go ahead and give that a try.
I'm a little bit nervous on this one. Okay, so my hand's far enough away. Okay. And I gotta make sure I pull it out far enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the features on this DeWalt that makes it so cool is the shadow line on the blade. And so you watch, as she pulls it down, notice how the shadow gets clearer and it's a nice clean line. So this is the exact width of your blade. So now you know exactly where the blade is going to cut. And so why this matters, can you pull that up a second? If I were to draw a pencil line on this board, let's say my mark, I just made a measurement, and I want to cut right here on the point of this arrow, you can line your board up with that shadow line and know exactly you're cutting in the right place. Otherwise, if you didn't have that shadow, you would have to try to line it up with the edge of the blade, which you can do, but this just makes a nice, quick, perfect reference, so you know exactly where it's going to be. So what's really cool with that shadow feature is, let's say you have to make an irregular angle cut. It's a scribe line, you aren't sure what degree that is, so you can't just follow the detent plate. What you can do is you leave it in that free floating section. You can grab the handle and bring it down so you see the shadow, and now you can spin it until you line it up perfectly with your pencil mark. Once you get it lined up, you can lock it in place, and now you're ready to go. You know the exact angle is going to be perfect just by using that shadow line. So when you are done using the saw, the first thing you want to do is pull the head of the saw all the way down, and then push in that knob that locks it in place. Perfect. And now go ahead and lock it so it doesn't slide. And then you're going to swing it over to the 60-degree angle on the detent plate. And the last step, turn off the light. So whenever you're done using the saw, this is the lockdown feature you want to do. Make sure you leave it like that. So after using the miter saw, do you have any questions about it?
No, I feel pretty comfortable.
All right, what are some safety things you think are important to remember?
Your glasses?
Yep, first off, you always want to be wearing your safety glasses. Where should your hands be?
Away from the blade.
Right, you always want to keep your fingers at least a finger or a hand's width away from your blade. Don't get too close. If you have a little piece, you don't want to do that. Just go find a longer piece. You don't want to make little tiny cuts. Keep your fingers far away from the blade.
Yes.
What else do we have to remember?
Lock this in place so it can't move.
Yeah, make sure your features before you go make a cut. Everything is locked in place. And what do we do with the board that we're cutting?
We push it into the corner of the fence.
Yep, we want to make sure we're pushing it down and back at the same time. So think you're aiming for the back corner of the fence. And whenever you're cutting, you want the board to be perfectly flat against. If it's leaning, if you can see a gap, the board's like this. That's very dangerous because the blower is naturally going to want to push over with the blade, which will bind and then make things jump, and it'll scare you, right? And you might lose a finger. So make sure you keep it nice and tight. If you're doing these steps, your fingers will all stay intact and you'll be nice and safe. So thank you for joining us on this episode, and tune in next time for our next episode of Tool Time!